Good morning, everybody. Good morning, good morning, good morning. I just saw I got a text from Frank's Card Corner. Hopefully, he'll jump in with me and I can answer his question. Sorry about that, Frank. As soon as I gone live, I got that text from you. But if I don't see him on here, I'll just respond to him when I finish with the live stream for today. Hopefully, everybody out there is having a great and wonderful start to your week. This is Monday, January 27th, 2020. And I'm going to give it a few more minutes before we get into our team history. Today we are going to do the Montreal Expos. All right. So we're going to get ready to do this content in about a minute or so. Give a few people a few minutes to get into the stream here real quick. Then we will start talking about the history of the Montreal Expos. And of course, in tentatively, basically, as of December the 3rd, 2004, the Montreal Expos relocated to Washington, D.C. to become the Washington Nationals. So before that point, though, we'll go over the Montreal Expos from their beginnings and a little bit of a brief intro about the Montreal Expos. So I'm going to give it one more minute. That'll give me 5 minutes since I jumped on to the live. Pretty much 4 minutes. We'll hit the 4-minute mark here. And then I'll just get into reading the history of Topps Baseball. Not Topps Baseball, the Montreal Expos on this edition of my Monday video series. Baseball team history for the Montreal Expos. All right. Let me get everything lined up on my other computer here. So I'm good to go. Let's see. All right. Here, I got this set up. Okay, got that. Live chat going there. Okay. So we are at the 5-minute mark when I went live. So I'm going to go ahead and get into the reading of the baseball team history for the Montreal Expos. So the Montreal Expos, the French pronunciation, Les Expos de Montreal, were a Canadian professional baseball team based in Montreal, Quebec. The Expos were the first Major League Baseball franchise located outside the United States. They played in the National League East Division from 1969 till 2004. Following the 2004 season, the franchise relocated to Washington, D.C. and became the Washington Nationals. Immediately after the minor league Triple-A Montreal Royals folded in 1960. Political leaders in Montreal sought an MLB franchise, and when the National League evaluated expansion candidates for the 1969 season, it awarded a team to Montreal, named after the Expo 67 World's Fair. The Expos originally played at Jarry Park Stadium before moving to Olympic Stadium in 1977. The Expos failed to post a winning record in any of their first 10 seasons. The team won its only division title in the strike-shortened 1981 season, but lost the 1981 National League Championship Series to the Los Angeles Dodgers. The team was sold in 1991 by its majority founding owner, Charles Bronfman, to a consortium headed by Claude Brook. Philippe Alou was promoted to the team's field manager in 1992, becoming MLB's first Dominican-born manager. He led the team to 4 winning seasons, including 1994, where the Expos had the best record in baseball before a players' strike that ended the season. Alou became the Expos leader in games managed with 1,409. The aftermath of the 1994 strike initiated a downward spiral as the Expos chose to sell their best players, and attendance and interest in the team declined. Following a failed attempt to disband the Expos, Major League Baseball purchased the team prior to the 2002 season after the club failed to secure funding for a new ballpark. In their final 2 seasons, the team played 22 home games each year at Hiram Bithorn Stadium in San Juan, Puerto Rico. On September 29, 2004, the MLB announced the franchise would relocate to Washington, D.C. for the 2005 season. And the Expos played their final home game in Montreal. The Expos posted an all-time record of 2,753 wins and 2,943 losses and 4 ties during their 36 years in Montreal. Vladimir Guerrero led the franchise in both home runs and batting average, and Steve Rogers in wins and strikeouts. 3 pitchers threw 4 no-hitters, Bill Stoneman twice, Charlie Lee, and Dennis Martinez, who pitched the 13th official perfect game in Major League Baseball history. The Expos retired 4 numbers in Montreal, and 9 former members have been elected to the National Baseball Hall of Fame, with Gary Carter, Andre Dawson, and Tim Raines as plaques depicting them with Expos caps. All right, next we'll go into the history of the team and their founding. Paul is in the house. Hello, I'm just watching a couple of your other videos. Cool there, Paul. Nice to have you jump in here for a second. Do appreciate you being here for the live this morning. Looks like we got 3 people in the stream. Just one chatty now. So now we'll go on to the next section, the history of the Montreal Expos. Founding in 1960 to 1968. Professional baseball in Montreal dates back to 1890, when the teams briefly played in the International Association. A second attempt at hosting a pro team failed in 1895. The Montreal Royals of the Eastern League were subsequently founded in 1897 and played 20 seasons. The Royals were revived in 1928 and were purchased by the Brooklyn Dodgers in 1939 to serve as one of their AAA affiliates. Under Dodgers' management, the Royals won 7 International League championships and 3 Junior World Series titles between 1941 and 1958. In 1946, Jackie Robinson joined the Royals and led the team to a Junior World Series title in advance of his breaking baseball's color barrier 1 year later. By the late 1950s, the Royals' championship years were past, and faced with declining attendance, the team was sold and relocated following the 1960 season as the Dodgers reduced the number of teams they maintained at the AAA level. Almost immediately upon the Royals' demise, Montreal Mayor Jean Drapeau and City Executive Committee Chairman Gary Jerry Snyder began their campaign for a Major League Baseball team. The city, which had previously been considered a leading candidate to acquire the St. Louis Browns. The team had relocated in 1933, was too late to submit its candidacy for a team as part of the National League 1962 expansion, but presented its bid to be the league's owner at the winter meetings in 1967. Aiding Montreal's bid was the fact that Walter O'Malley, who owned the Dodgers and formerly oversaw the Montreal Royals, was the chairman of the National League's expansion committee. On May 27, 1968, National League President Warren Giles announced the league would add expansion teams in San Diego and Montreal at the cost of $10 million each, U.S. With the franchise secured, Snyder built an ownership group of 6 partners led by financier Jean-Louis Levesque and Seagram, their heir Charles Bronfman. Levesque was originally tapped as chairman and public face of the ownership group since he was a francophone. However, he bowed out and Bronfman took over as chairman. The new group was faced with the immediate problem of finding a suitable facility in which to play for at least 2 years. Drapeau had promised the National League a domed stadium, thought to be a must due to Montreal's cold weather in April, October, and sometimes September, would be built in 1971. However, Snyder's successor as executive committee chairman, Lucien Chaulnier, told Bronfman that the Drapeau could not make such a guarantee on his own authority. As 1968 dragged on without movement from the city on the facility, Bronfman and his group threatened to walk away. While they had more than enough money between them to pay the first installment of the expansion fee, they wanted assurances that a park would be built before proceeding any further with the effort. The Lorimore Stadium, which hosted the Royals, was rejected even as a temporary facility. It could not be expanded beyond its 20,000-seat capacity because it was in a residential area. The Autostade, home of the Canadian Football League's Montreal Alouettes, was ruled out due to the prohibitive cost of expanding it and adding a dome, as well as doubts that the city even had the right to make the needed renovations to the federally owned building. By August 1968, the National League owners had grown increasingly concerned about the unresolved stadium question, putting the franchise's future in doubt. There were rumors of awarding the franchise to Buffalo, New York, instead, whose War Memorial Stadium was ready to host a team. League president Warren Giles was reassured of Montreal's viability when shown a 3,000-seat community field in the centrally located Jarry Park that Drapeau proposed expanding to 30,000 seats as a temporary home for the Expos at a cost of over $1 million Canadian. Several options for team name were considered. The Royals was a popular option with the fans in honor of the minor league Royals, but the name had already been taken by the Kansas City Royals. Other names considered included the Voyeurs and Nationals. The team settled on Expos, a name with the same spelling in French and English, in recognition of the recently concluded Expo 67 World's Fair. Less than a year after the city was awarded the team, the Expos took up the field to begin the 1969 season. All right, it looks like we have a few people that showed up in the house here. Let me go through the chat real quick here. All right, Big Country's Wheelhouses in the house. Kevin's Card Collecting and more. Good morning, Donald. Boom Slang's in the house. Yo, Donald. Kevin's Card Collecting. Okay, ta-da, Kevin and everyone. Hey there, Kevin put up a silver video today, but it's sideways. All right, and then Gorilla Family's here. Hope you're well, sir. Yes. Sorry about that. Let me drink a sip of water here. Yes, I am doing well. Just had to wet the whistle a little bit. Looks like Gorilla Family. All right, and looks like I am caught up now. So yes, we are doing the Montreal Expos, in which case most likely next Monday I will continue and then go on when they switched from the Expos to the Washington Nationals. So next week I'll undoubtedly do the Washington Nationals for the team history for next week, kind of continuing on with this series here. Danny and Gray's Toys is in the house. Hey everyone. All right, so now we're going to move on to all right, so let's move on to Jarry Park years from 1969 to 1976. So with Gene Mauch as their inaugural manager, the Expos made their debut on April 8th, 1969, and the 11-10 victory over the New York Mets at Shea Stadium. The team played its first home game and the first major league game outside the United States on April 14th. It was an 8-7 victory over the St. Louis Cardinals before 29,184 fans at Jarry Park Stadium. 3 days later, on April 17th, in just the team's 9th game played in their history up to that point, Bill Stoneman pitched the first no-hitter in Expos history with a 7-0 victory over the Philadelphia Phillies. The excitement of the early season heroics quickly gave way to the realities of being an expansion team as the Expos struggled for much of their inaugural season. Montreal tied their expansion cousins, the San Diego Padres, for the worst record in the National League with a record of 52-110. The team fared little better following the following seasons. The Expos went 73-89 in 1970 and in 71-90 in 1971. The team's best player and first star in its early seasons was Rusty Staub, acquired from the Houston Astros in a trade prior to the Expos' inaugural season. He led the Expos with 30 home runs in 1970 and, owing to his red hair, was nicknamed La Grande Orange. Staub was Montreal's lone representative at the Major League Baseball All-Star Game in the team's first 3 seasons, and endeared himself to the local fans by learning French. Also popular was pitcher Claude Raymond, who completed his major league career with Montreal in 1972 and was the team's first French-Canadian star. Pitcher Carl Morton, who posted an 18-11 record in 1970, was the first player in franchise history to be named the National League Rookie of the Year. Bill Stoneman threw his second no-hitter and his first pitched outside the United States in a 7-0 win over the Mets in Montreal on October 2nd, 1972. The team failed to post a winning season in its first 10 years and finished 5th or 6th in the 6-team National League 8 times. Attendance declined as the initial excitement of having a team wore off. It recovered briefly in 1973 as the Expos mounted an unsuccessful charge at the National League East pennant before declining sharply in 1974 and beyond. By 1976, the attendance had dropped to just over 600,000 fans over the course of the season, less than half of what the Expos drew in their inaugural season. The on-field product was not only concern for the Expos. Jarry Park was only intended to serve as a temporary home until 1971 at the latest. Even allowing for this, it left much to be desired as a baseball venue. The grandstands were completely exposed to the elements, forcing the Expos to postpone a number of early season games. Additionally, the sun set directly in the face of first baseman forcing delays. Due to numerous delays and cost overruns with its intended replacement, Olympic Stadium, the Expos were forced to stay in Jarry until 1976. The team's future was also placed in doubt following an angry speech by Bronfman in which he threatened to relocate his family and the Seagroom Company outside Quebec if the separatist party Quebecus PQ won a majority government in the 1976 Quebec election. The party Quebecus did win the election, however, Bronfman and the Expos remained in Quebec. Let me take a look. I seen the chat rolling up here shortly. Dun dun dun. Going back, sorry. All right, Gorilla Family, Danny and Gray. Our Posada's in the house. All right, Paul Deitch. Didn't know any information about Buffalo because I watched old Bills games at the Buffalo Rock Pile. Kevin, I switched them at the post office when I was doing the SASE, self-addressed stamped envelope. Oh, self-addressed stamped envelope. Okay, gotcha. Hey Posada, hello our Posada. All right, so let's see. You guys just chatting between each other. That's good. Danny and Grace, Gorilla got your package Friday, and yes, for sure, Kevin. Okay, you guys are just chit-chatting amongst each other, which is fine. Hello, Don. Thanks, Gorilla. Appreciate you guys hopping in today. Breaks and stuff is in the house. All right. And just hello, Breaks. Hello, Donald. All right. I will get back into my next section of the history of the Montreal Expos. So the Big O and Blue Monday from 1977 to 1981. For the 1977 season, the Expos moved into their new ballpark, Olympic Stadium, 6 years later than originally scheduled. For a time in the 1976-77 offseason, however, it appeared that the Expos would have to play at least the early part of the season at Jarry Park due to delays in securing a lease for Olympic Stadium. The team broke off negotiations not long after the PQ's landslide victory in the 1976 provincial election. Negotiations dragged out through the winter, leading the Expos to begin selling 1977 season tickets under the assumption they would have to play at Jarry. However, an agreement was finally reached in early 1977, and a total of 57,592 fans attended Montreal's opening day 7-2 loss to Philadelphia. The new facility was a significant upgrade, although weather-related issues created Montreal's harsh climate persisted until the stadium's roof was installed in 1987. Over the years, the stadium became notorious for its poor playing conditions. Players were frequently at risk for injury due to thin padding on the outfield fences, as well as the original artificial turf that remained in place for over 2 decades. Ultimately, the park became viewed as a white elephant. On the field, the Expos continued to fare poorly. The team won 75 games in 1977 and 1976. And 76 in 1978. Though the losing seasons mounted, the Expos built a solid core of players led by Gary Carter, who went on to become one of baseball's best-hitting catchers, pitcher Steve Rogers, and outfielder Andre Dawson and Tim Raines. They supplemented their young roster with veteran acquisitions such as future Hall of Famer Tony Perez, and in 1977, the Expos also hired Dick Williams as team manager. Williams had developed a reputation for nurturing young talent. He had managed a young Boston Red Sox team to the American League pennant in 1967 and the Oakland Athletics to back-to-back World Series in 1972 and 1973. In 1979, Montreal had its first winning season in franchise history. In mid-July, the Expos led the National League East by 6.5 games before finishing second to the Pittsburgh Pirates by 2 games with a 95-65 record. The fans responded. Montreal drew 2 million fans for the first time in franchise history, and it was the first of 5 consecutive seasons that the team was in the top 4 of National League attendance. Though they won fewer games in 1980, the Expos finished merely 1 game behind the Philadelphia Phillies for the division lead. In both seasons, the Expos were in the hunt for the division title into the last weekend of the season before losing to the Ultimate World Series champion. In 1981, Charlie Lee pitched the third no-hitter in franchise history, defeating the San Francisco Giants by a score of 4-0 on May 10, 1981. The Expos were in third place in the National League East with a 30-25 record when the season was halted for 2 months by a players' strike. By the time the strike ended, 713 games had been lost and could not possibly be made up. Major League Baseball chose to adopt a split season schedule, which gave the Expos a fresh start in the second half of the season. With the team languishing near the 500 mark in post-strike play, the club fired Williams and replaced him with scouting director Jim Fanning. The team continued to struggle, though, and had a 19-19 record with 15 games left to play. Montreal won 11 of the remaining games and finished in first place, a half game ahead of the Pittsburgh Pirates, thereby qualifying for the franchise's first postseason berth. Terry Francona caught the final out, a fly ball hit by Dave Kingman, to seal a 5-4 victory over the New York Mets in the clinching game. In 1981, the National League Division Series, the Expos faced the first half winners, the defending world champion Phillies. Montreal won the first 2 games at Olympic Stadium by identical 3-1 scores before dropping the following 2 games in Philadelphia. In the deciding 5th game, Montreal's Steve Rogers faced Steve Carlton in a pitcher's duel. Rogers pitched a complete game shutout as Montreal advanced to the 1981 National League Championship Series with a 3-0 win. Facing the Los Angeles Dodgers, Montreal split the first 2 games of the best-of-5 series in Los Angeles before returning home for the final 3 games. Montreal won Game 3, but failed in their first attempt to close out the series by losing Game 4 and set up a deciding 5th game. The deciding game, postponed by a day due to rain, was played on October 19, 1981, in near freezing temperatures. The game was tied at 1 entering the 9th inning when Fanning opted to have his top starter, Steve Rogers, come out of the bullpen to pitch. Rogers retired the first 2 ballers before facing Rick Monday. What followed was the defining moment in Expos history. On a 3-1 count, Rogers hung a sinking fastball that Monday hit over the center field fence for the game-winning and series-clinching home run. The moment and game became known to Expos fans as Blue Monday. The dramatic loss was a bitter defeat for a franchise who by that time had been adopted as Canada's most popular baseball team. Okay, let me take a peek at the chat again. A posada is a hotel, I believe. Thumbs up if you haven't. Yeah, thumbs up in the chat, guys. Do appreciate that. Give me those thumbs up in the chat. Do appreciate it. Don't think I missed anything else in the chat. Let me go back through here. All right. Let me see here. All Just checking things out here. Okay, Camden Disney's in the house. All right. Okay. Dun, dun, dun. Dun, dun, dun. Okay. All right. Let's get into the team of the 1980s from 1982 to 1988. So by the end of the 1979 season, the Expos had earned a reputation for having one of the strongest player development systems in baseball. The team had stockpiled young talent throughout its roster, including 4 starting pitchers below the age of 23, and was hailed as the team of the 80s. When Montreal hosted the 1982 Major League Baseball All-Star Game on July 13, 1982, Expos fans voted 4 of their own into the starting lineup: Carter, Dawson, Raines, and Rogers, while Al Oliver was named as a reserve. It was only the second time since 1969 that the host team had 4 starters. The National League claimed a 4-1 victory in front of 59,057 fans in the first All-Star game held outside the United States. Rogers was the winning pitcher. Baseball historian and author Jonah Carey argued in his book Up, and Away that no one at the stadium could know it then, but baseball in Montreal peaked that night at the Big O. The Expos were widely predicted to win the National League East in 1982. Sports Illustrated Baseball Digest and the Sporting News were among the publications that favored Montreal. However, the team disappointed. Montreal finished 3rd in the division with 86 wins. The Expos replaced Fanning with a Bill Verdon in 1983 and under their new manager, led the division in mid-July. However, the team faded down the stretch and finished with an 82-80 record. The Expos won more games between 1979 and 1983 than any other team in the National League East, but had only 1 postseason appearance to show for it. Hoping to turn the team's fortunes around, the Expos signed 42-year-old veteran Pete Rose, who was second all-time in base hits to Ty Cobb, to a 1-year contract in 1984. Rose reached a career milestone in Montreal's home opener by recording the 4,000th hit of his career in a 5-1 victory over Philadelphia on April 13th. Though players and management had praised the acquisition of Rose and predicted he would help the team win the division, he was ineffective for Montreal. Rose batted only .259 and failed to hit a home run in 95 games before he was traded back to his original team, Cincinnati, and Montreal finished with a losing record on the season. Montreal's failed 1984 season resulted in a 31% decrease in attendance. At the same time, salaries were escalating throughout baseball. As a consequence, the Expos completed a major trade following the season, sending Gary Carter to the New York Mets on December 10, 1984, in exchange for 4 players. In trading Carter, the Expos gave up a team icon who, like Rusty Staub before him, endeared himself to the fans by learning French and being one of the most accessible players on the team. The trade came 1 year after Bronfman had called the 7-year, $12.6 million contract Carter signed in 1981 the biggest mistake he had made in his life. The economics of Major League Baseball also resulted in the departure of Andre Dawson following the 1986 season. Throughout that offseason, MLB owners concluded, at the behest of Commissioner Peter Ueberroth, to drive salaries for free agents down. Dawson, who should have been one of the most valuable free agents on the market that year, discovered that not only was there little interest in signing him, but that the Expos were publicly commenting about his knee problems in an effort to further drive interest down. Angered by these actions, Dawson walked into the Chicago Cubs training camp with a signed blank contract. The Cubs agreed to sign Dawson to a 1-year, $500,000 contract, less than half of his previous salary. Dawson hit 49 home runs and drove in 137 runs in 1987, attaining the honors of National League Most Valuable Player. Tim Raines was also affected by collusion after receiving no offer worth more than $1.5 million he earned in 1986. Raines returned to the Expos on a 3-year, $5 million contract. He had one of the best seasons of his career in 1987, leading the National League with 123 runs in 139 games, stealing 50 bases, batting .330, and hitting 18 home runs. He was also named the most valuable player of the 1987 Major League Baseball All-Star Game, as he drove in the game's only 2 runs with a triple in the 13th inning. Raines was ultimately traded to the Chicago White Sox in 1990. All right, let me go down here. See if I missed anything in the chat. Good morning, Candy. I may have missed it, but does anyone know the story of the Expos logo? Looks like JB to me. The Expos logo. Let me see real quick if they mention anything about that. Let's see. Team logo. Let me check something here real quick there for you there, Kevin. No, I don't think it's really a logo. I know it could almost look like a JB, but I think it's just the letter M. If you look there real quick with it big and large right here on the screen, it looks like it's probably just a big M for Montreal. It's just the way they have it with the red, white, and blue. The red, white, and blue in their logo. All right. So just wanted to kind of highlight that for you. But yeah. Could kind of almost look like a JB. All right. Let's get to the next section here. El Presidente, El Perfecto. So this is the Montreal Expos from 1989 to 1993. On the field, the Expos won just 4 games. Let me get that repositioned here. Make sure it's not going to fall off my keyboard stand here. Had won just 4 more games than they lost between 1986 and 1991 as the organization set about rebuilding its development system and acquiring a new generation of players. The team struggled to attract free agents to Montreal, and Bronfman had grown disillusioned with both the business of baseball and the challenge of drawing fans to Olympic Stadium for a middling ball club. He hoped to take one more chance at winning a title. However, in 1989, the Expos made a push for a division title by acquiring starting pitcher and pending free agent Mark Langston from the Seattle Mariners. The price would ultimately prove to be a high one, as the Expos gave up future Hall of Famer Randy Johnson and two other pitchers. The trade helped propel the Expos to first place in the National League East by the All-Star break. They held the top spot into August before Langston and the team collapsed. The Expos finished fourth in the division with an 81-81 record, and Langston left Montreal as a free agent. Bronfman grew increasingly uneasy about the reckless spending of his fellow team owners, increased strife with the players, and overall direction of MLB, Major League Baseball. According to then-team president Claude Bronco, the team's late-season decline in 1989 proved too much for Bronfman, who asked him to seek a buyer for the team. Bronfman hoped to sell the team for around $50 million, but both he and Bronco found it impossible to find a local businessman willing to take primary ownership of the team. Groups from American cities were interested. However, one group offered to buy the club for $135 million and relocate it to Miami. However, Bronfman viewed a relocation as a last resort. Instead, Bronco opted to lead the group himself. The city and province agreed to fund $33 million of the $100 million sales price Bronfman had settled on, after which he and partner Jacques Menard convinced 11 other Canadian businesses and businessmen, such as Bell Canada, Bejardins Group, and Jean Coutu Group, and Loblaw Companies, to buy minority stakes. The sale was completed on November 29, 1990. However, many of the investors Bronco cajoled into joining the partnership made it clear that they considered their investment to be the equivalent of charitable donations and were not interested in providing additional funding. With a new ownership group in place, the Expos traded Tim Raines to the Chicago White Sox in a 5-player deal. General manager David Dombrowski fired manager Buck Rogers, who had managed the team since 1985 after the team started the 1981 season with a 20-29 record, replacing him with Tom Reynolds. Mark Gardner pitched 9 no-hit innings in a July 26, 1991 game before losing 1-0 in the 10th inning to the Los Angeles Dodgers. 2 days later, also in Los Angeles, Dennis Martinez achieved a rare feat, throwing the 13th official perfect game in Major League Baseball history, based on MLB's 1991 redefinition of a perfect game, winning 2-0. Dave Van Horn's Ionic Hall of El Presidente, El Perfecto, following the final out, became a hallmark of the Expos lore. Martinez's catcher, Ron Hasse, also caught Len Barker's perfect game 10 years earlier and remains the only player to catch 2 perfect games in MLB history. The euphoria of the pitching feats did not last, as the Expos were rendered homeless for the final month of the season after a 50-ton beam collapsed from Olympic Stadium structure and fell 9 meters onto a public concourse hours before a motocross event. On September 13th, the Expos hinted that they would have to open the 1982 season elsewhere unless Olympic Stadium was certified safe. While the stadium itself was given a clean bill of health by engineers in November, it took longer to get one for the roof since it had been badly ripped in a June windstorm. Ultimately, it was decided to keep the roof closed at all times, and it only been opened 88 times in a little more than 4 years. The Expos finished 1991 with a 71-90 record, 6th in the National League East, and drew fewer than 1 million fans in for the first time since 1976. However, the foundation of the Expos' future was establishing their places in MLB history. Larry Walker, Marquis Grissom, and Delino DeShields had made their debut the season prior, and the team acquired Moises Alou in a trade with Pittsburgh. Moises' father, Felipe, who had been a longtime employee of the Expos, was promoted to manager during the 1992 season and became the first native of the Dominican Republic to manage a Major League Baseball team. In 1993, DeShields was sent to Los Angeles in exchange for Pedro Martinez. The deal was initially pillared by the Montreal Gazette and other local publications as a move designed to save money rather than improve the ball club. Nonetheless, the Expos improved on the field. They won 87 games in 1992, 94, and 1993, and finished second in the National League East in both seasons. 1994 and the players' strike. The Expos were recognized as having a strong team entering the 1994 season, but their hopes of winning the division were significantly impacted by realignment as the three-time defending West Division champion Atlanta Braves were shifted to the East. Atlanta opened the season with 13 wins in 14 games and quickly opened up an 8.5-game lead on Montreal. By late June, the Expos moved to 2.5 games back when they hosted the Braves. Montreal won 2 out of 3 games in the series, including a late-game victory in the opener over future Hall of Famer pitcher Greg Maddux, and the players viewed as the turning point of their season. Montreal then embarked on a West Coast trip in which they won the final 5 games and entered the All-Star break in first place. The Expos pulled away from the Braves after the break between July 18th and August 11th. Montreal won 20 games and lost only 3. For the second time in team history, 5 players were named All-Stars: Moises Alou, Will Cordero, Darren Fletcher, Marquis Grissom, and Ken Hill. Most of my career, you'd go to the park that night and hope you were going to win it. In 1994, we pretty much knew we were going to win it. Losing wasn't part of the equation after the All-Star break. We played the Braves and beat them again. I remember leaving Atlanta and we were just laughing like, this is our competition? Larry Walker's retrospective of the 1994 Expos. That was a little insert I wanted to read there. An offense led by Grissom, Moises Alou, Larry Walker, and Will Cordero scored more than 5 runs per game, with a record of 74-40 on pace for a 106-win season, as the pitching staff with Butch Henry, Ken Hill, Jeff Facero, and young Pedro Martinez put up the National League's best ERA. The Expos had the best record in baseball on the morning of August 12th when the MLB's players went on strike. The season began without a collective bargaining agreement, as MLB's owners could not agree on how to share revenue between the teams. Many teams were unwilling to agree to a revenue sharing unless a salary cap was put in place, something which the Major League Baseball Players Association adamantly opposed. Unable to come to an agreement, the owners attempted to unilaterally force their system into effect, prompting the players to walk out. Most players believed they would be back on the field by Labor Day, celebrated on the same date in the United States as Labor Day. At the latest, on September 14th, following a month of fruitless negotiations, the remainder of the season was canceled. The franchise would never reach the playoffs as the Expos again. From Broncos' perspective, a salary cap was not a major concern for the Expos as they could not afford to spend the maximum value of any negotiated cap. But when the strike ended 8 months later by the order of the United States federal judge Sonia Stoudemire, the failure to implement strong revenue sharing was a major blow to the Expos. The team had already built a reputation as a penny-pinching organization. Larry Walker once complained in the media that the team asked the players to buy their own vitamins. With the second lowest payroll in Major League Baseball in 1994. Following the strike, the team initiated a fire sale of players. Ken Hill, John Wetland, and Marquis Grissom were traded, while Larry Walker was allowed to leave as a free agent. Moises Alou, Pedro Martinez, and Mel Rojas would eventually follow. In his book, My Turn at Bat, Branco argued that the fire sale was the only viable option, since his partners in the ownership group were not interested in financing the team's losses. Branco estimated that he had tried to keep the 1994 team together. The Expos would have lost $25 million in 1995, which would have pushed the franchise to the edge of bankruptcy. He claimed that he would have certainly kept Hill, Wetland, Grissom, and Walker, and had the partners been willing to put up the money necessary to keep them in Montreal. When Branco told manager Kevin Malone that Hill, Wetland, Grissom, and Walker all had to go, Malone tried to persuade Branco to keep at least one of them. It was to no avail. Branco told Malone that they all had to be off the roster by the deadline for salary arbitration. Even though this made it all but impossible to get any leverage, impossible deals. As a result, the Expos got almost nothing in return. So let's see. What do we got here? Dearman's in the house. How you doing there, buddy? Dearman's in the house. Let me go back up through the chat here just a little bit. I think I must have missed a bunch here. Middle is an M for Montreal. Yeah, okay. Dun, dun, dun. All right, Dearman saying hi. Gorilla. Trying to think what that symbol is for. Hiya, Dearman. Hello, Dearman. Posada. Good morning, Dearman. There we go. Everybody's saying hi to Dearman. Wow, this is the longest I've seen Dearman in for a while. Nice to have you back there, buddy. Been missing you. How are you today, Kevin? Four Leaf Cards is in the house. There we go. How you doing there, Four Leaf Cards? Hopefully you are having a wonderful day today. Let me see here real quick, and then I'll be right back to you guys. Just gotta check everything here in the chat. Alright. Appreciate you being there, Four Leaf. I will check out your channel when I do have a chance. Need a little background noise, and this is better than radio. It's like a book on tape. Thanks there, Four Leaf Cards. Alright. Yes, I do a lot of history on my channel here, on my YouTube. I do team history, I do player biographies, I do a Hall of Fame series, I go through the Topps baseball trading card series. So I do have video series that I do. On Fridays, I do my family mail call Fridays. And then I should be kicking off and getting into full gear with Saturdays with my Hall of Fame player biographies and card reviews for those players as I do them. Okay, So for those that are new in the channel, that is, you can go to my About Me tab on my channel page. It tells you my full schedule for the week. I usually definitely take Sundays off. I might rework my schedule because trying to bounce things when my wife's off on Mondays. But I'm going to go ahead and continue with our history lesson here as we go into the decline of the Montreal Expos. So in 1995 through the year 2000, the strike and ensuing fire sale left fans in Montreal livid. The Expos finished last in the National League East in 1995. An average game attendance fell by nearly 26% from 24,543 to 18,189. Interest in the Expos continued to decline in the years that followed. They would never average more than 20,000 fans per game in a season again during their tenure in Montreal. While noting the Atlanta Braves went on to win 11 consecutive National League titles following the strike. Jonah Carey expressed the viewpoint of the fans as it related to Bronco and the team's owners. Expos fans couldn't help but wonder if that could have been them celebrating every year. And Bronco convinced the team's cheapskate owners to spend a few damn dollars or take the leap of faith that short-term financial pain would lead to long-term success. The media, meanwhile, had taken to calling the Expos a AAA team, as the team seemed to enter a period where they would develop players only to move them on to other organizations. In spite of a sharp decline in attendance, Bronchu, maybe that's how you say it, Bronchu claimed the Expos turned a small profit in 1995, while ticket sales increased in other markets in the seasons following the strike, though Montreal's fan base continued to erode. Even with the loss of most of their best players, the Expos were competitive in 1996, achieving second place in the National League East with an 88-74 record. The team fared poorly in the following 5 seasons, however, finishing with a losing record in each year and no higher than 4th in the division. Individually, Pedro Martinez became the first native of the Dominican Republic and only Expo to win the National League Cy Young Award. He won the award in 1997 after recording an 18-7 record with an earned run average of 1.90. 1 week after he was announced as the National Cy Young winner, Martinez was traded to the Boston Red Sox as part of another salary purge. As the 1990s wore on, interest in the Expos dwindled to the point that they were barely part of Montreal's sports landscape. Alou recalled in the latter part of the decade, an old friend of his who owned a team in the Dominican Republic came to Montreal for a visit and couldn't find any downtown store that sold Expos caps, nor did he see anyone wearing an Expos cap during his week-long stay in the city. When he took a taxi to a game at Olympic Stadium, the driver couldn't find the entrance, and there were no signs anywhere touting games. According to Alou's friend, with such lackluster marketing, it was no surprise the Expos couldn't attract any fans. Carey later wrote the Expos would not have been in this position had a better financed champion with the resources and the patience to shepherd the team through the 1990s bought the team. Bronchu attempted to convince his partners that the only long-term solution to keep the Expos in Montreal was to replace Olympic Stadium. In addition to being poorly located, far from population centers, restaurants, and bars, fans perceived it was cavernous and unsafe. Additionally, free agents were letting it be known that they were not willing to play for the Expos because of Olympic Stadium's poor playing conditions. A proposed 35,000-seat downtown facility to be called Labatt Park was announced in 1997 with a budget cost of $250 million and an anticipated opening date of 2001. It would have been a retro classic park with a facade reminiscent of historic Bonaventure Station, according to a Montreal Gazette editorial supporting the new park. Broncos' threat to move the team unless Olympic Stadium was replaced was simple logic. Broncos sought $150 million in funding from the provincial government, but the Premier Lucien Bouchard refused, saying he could not authorize public funding for a stadium when the province was being forced to close hospitals and had still not paid the Olympic Stadium debt. Many members of the consortium instead favored selling the team. Hoping to pressure a sale, some members began to feed anonymous tips to the French press to make internal discord between Bronco and his partners. Public attendance continued to fall, decreasing by 39% in 1998 to an average of 11,295 spectators per game. It was the first of 5 consecutive seasons in which Montreal drew fewer than 1 million fans. One of the few bright spots of this time was the blossoming of Vladimir Guerrero into a star. He made 4 consecutive All-Star games from 1999 to 2002, each time as the Expos' sole representative. Guerrero would eventually be elected to the National Baseball Hall of Fame in 2018. By 1999, the partners publicly began to question Bronco's fitness to lead the organization and was criticized by the media. Bronco was also accused of having a secret deal with the MLB commissioner, Bud Selig, to relocate the Expos to Washington, D.C., charges he denied in a spring press conference held to answer the accusations of his partners. Bronco's rebuttals fell on deaf ears as fans sided with the consortium's smear campaign against Bronco. He was ultimately replaced as managing general partner by the American art dealer Jeffrey Loria, who was initially hailed as the franchise's savior. Loria had originally bid for the team in 1991, but Bronco and Menard had balked at his demand for controlling interest. Okay. So relocation in 2001 through 2004. So when Loria took control of the team, he let it be known that Bronco's low-budget approach, or as he called it, business as usual, was over. He promised to rebuild the Expos with a winning attitude and winning players, in an effort to bring the team back to where it had been only 6 years earlier. To that end, he drafted a new partnership agreement that gave him the right to call for cash investments in exchange for team equity, an option that had been unavailable to Bronco. Most of the minority partners, though, continued to treat their participation as public relations gesture and remained uninterested in investing additional money. When Loria issued a cash call in May 2000, the only other partners to increase their contributions were Cantu, Loblaw, and Stefan Bronfman. Rather than contribute more money, the minority partners proposed trading Guerrero. Loria instantly vetoed this suggestion. As Loria increased his own financial contribution over the next 2 years, most of the other partners failed to do likewise, which resulted in Loria raising his share in the franchise to 92%. Speaking in retrospect, one of the minority partners, Mark Rottenberg, said that he was both fooled and used by Loria and called him a carpetbagger. The team payroll for 2000 increased to $33 million, nearly double the $17.9 million from the previous season. However, Loria's options for rebuilding the team were somewhat limited. He discovered that he needed to improve the team immediately in order to win back the fans' trust, rather than relying on long-term improvements via the draft. Even with the team's renowned willingness to spend more on talent, most elite players were reluctant to play in Montreal, given the franchise's uncertain future and Olympic Stadium's poor playing conditions. As a result, most of the increased payroll came from signings of free agent pitchers Grame Lloyd and Hideki Irabu, as well as a three-way trade with the Rangers and Blue Jays that brought Rangers first baseman Lee Stevens to Montreal. These moves failed to translate into on-field success. Lloyd missed the entire season due to arthroscopic surgery. Irabu posted a 7.2 ERA and Stevens only batted .265. The Expos lost 95 games. Interest in the team continued to decline as both fans and businesses were unwilling to lend their support to a non-competitive team. Loria continued to pursue the construction of a new ballpark. He sought support from Major League Baseball, the Quebec government, and architectural firm HOK Sport for a cheaper and redesigned version of Labatt Park that eschewed the retro classic concept in favor of a more modern design with curved contours and glass. HOK and MLB both thought Loria's proposed design was structurally unsound. More seriously, although Loria had been led to believe that Menard had convinced the provincial government to contribute funding, in reality no agreement had been reached. To bolster the team's finances, Loria had tried to renegotiate the Expos' broadcasting deals, which were far less valuable than that of any other team. He broke off negotiation with the Sports Network, the large English-language cable sports and network in Canada, when it only offered the Expos $5,000 per game, even allowing for the Expos' greatly reduced home territory compared to that of the Blue Jays. TSN's offer was still a pittance compared to the $200,000 it paid the Blue Jays at the time. Loria had similar issues with prospective radio partners. The only interested parties would only air Expos games as part of a brokerage agreement in which the team paid for the airtime. The Alouettes and Canadians had similar arrangements, which considered highly unusual at the time. Although the team continued its French radio coverage on the Telemedia network, those flagship CKAC had carried the Expos since 1973. The Expos were unable to reach an agreement for English radio broadcasts. This resulted in the end of the Expos' long run on CIQC, formerly CFCF, which had been the Expos' English radio outlet for about 4 years of their existence. No television coverage was available in either language. This left English-speaking fans relying on internet audiocasts. Local fans accused Loria and his stepson, David Sampson, of sabotage. In truth, though, according to the longtime Montreal sportscaster Mitch Menick, there was no Anglophone radio for the 2000 season because nobody wanted to pay for it. Years later, Sampson said that it had initially hoped that if the Expos got off to a hot start, local broadcasters would initiate new negotiations, but further discussions were never materialized. Dave Van Home, the team's English language play-by-play announcer since the team's inception, left at the season's end to work with the Florida Marlins. In 2001, the Montreal Expos drew only 642,748 fans, one of the smallest totals in MLB in decades. The minority partners, whose interest was now reduced to a combined 7%, became convinced that Loria had planned his moves to force them out. When pleas to C-League and MLB officials fell on deaf ears, the group became convinced that C-League and Loria considered to force the Expos out of Montreal. At the same time, MLB took steps to vote on contraction, with the Expos and the Minnesota Twins slated for elimination. On November 6, 2001, MLB owners voted 28-2 on contraction. Only the Expos and Twins opposed. Initial plans called for the Expos and Twins to play a lame duck season in 2002 before their franchises were revoked. Both teams were saved following a legal challenge filed in Minnesota that forced MLB to honor the Twins' lease with the Metrodome, as well as challenges by the MLBPA, as MLB was unable to find another candidate for contraction. The immediate threat for the Expos diminished, as MLB needed to keep an even number of teams to maintain the schedule. So shortly afterward, Loria and the Expos sold the Expos to MLB and used the money he received from the sale of the purchase to the Florida Marlins and John Henry, who had recently purchased the Boston Red Sox. As a result of the transaction, Loria turned a significant profit on his original $16 million investment. MLB bought the Expos from him for $120 million and gave him $38.5 million interest-free loan to complete the purchase of the Marlins. Following the sale, Loria took virtually everything of value with him to Miami, including Expos' computers and scouting reports. His departure also marked the final end of the proposed Labatt Park, though any realistic chance of the park being built ended when the Bouchard government repeated its previous refusal to commit any public money to the project. MLB formed Expos Baseball LP, a partnership of the other 29 clubs to operate the team. It appointed former Anaheim Angels president Tony Taveras as team president to oversee business operations and oversee a future move of the team, and Mets assistant general manager Omar Minaya as vice president, general manager, and operating head of the franchise. MLB's chief disciplinarian Frank Robinson was appointed as the team's manager. Minaya, the first Latino general manager in baseball history, inherited a difficult situation. He was hired only 72 hours before the start of spring training, and there were only 6 other employees in baseball operations. Most of the others had either followed Loria to the Marlins or taken jobs with other clubs. As the Expos began what many assumed as, at the time, to be their final season in 2002, the mood in Olympic Stadium for their home opener, a victory over the Marlins, was ugly. Montreal's home opener drew 35,000 fans, many of which came not only to say goodbye to the franchise, but also to express their disgust and anger at Loria. Loria's minority partners, who had gone from collectively owning 76% of the Expos to less than 7% of the Marlins, filed a Racketeer Influenced and Corruption Act, a RICO lawsuit against Major League Baseball, Selig, and Loria. The partners contended that Loria and the commissioner's office had conspired to deprive them of their shares by issuing cash calls, and thus deliberately undetermined the franchise future in Montreal. The partners were ultimately unsuccessful in their suit, and it was dismissed in 2005 after an arbitration panel rejected their claims. Okay, just looking at the chat real quick here, guys. Frank says here, Expos have a nice history, underappreciated. Yeah, they definitely had some budget problems, that's for sure. On the field, the 2002 Expos exceeded expectations and were in playoff contention for most of the season, as they were owned by the other teams, including their direct competitors. The Expos did not have any flexibility to increase their payroll for a last-ditch postseason drive. Operating under the belief that the Expos were playing their last season in Montreal, Manaea completed a blockbuster trade with the Cleveland Indians in late June to make a final run at bringing postseason success to the city, acquiring Bartolo Colon, one of baseball's top pitchers, in exchange for several star prospects without increasing payroll. Remembering how the Seattle Mariners had revived a stalled bid for what became Safeco Field with a playoff run in 1995. Manaea believed that if the Expos made the playoffs, the renewed public and private sector support would lead to a viable owner stepping forward who could keep the team in Montreal. Manaea made several smaller moves, but the team lost its early season momentum and went 7 games under 500 in July and August, and the Expos finished with an 83-79 record, their first winning season since 1996, but finished second in the National League East, 19 games out of both the division lead and the wild card. The Expos was saved by a new collective bargaining agreement between the owners and players that forbade contraction until at least 2006. Speculation of contraction was replaced by rumors of relocation, as it was obvious MLB did not intend to keep the team in Montreal. While the Major League Baseball was not ready to relocate the Expos right away, in 2003 it sought to increase revenue by having the team play 22 of 81 home games in San Juan, Puerto Rico. The Expos again found themselves in contention for the playoffs on August 29th. The team was tied with 4 other clubs for the National League wildcard spot. When MLB's rosters expanded on September 1st, C-League announced that the Expos would not be recalling any additional players from the minor leagues. The other owners had decided against spending a few extra $1,000, a small fraction of the team's $35 million payroll, to bolster the team. Several players, including relief pitcher Eric Knott, were sent back to the minors due to budget constraints. The team faded again, finishing 18 games out of first in the East and 8 games out of the wild card spot. Later, Manaea said that the denial of the September call-ups was a message to the players and a momentum killer. Carey later wrote that MLB's refusal to authorize the September call-ups ended that goodwill the Expos still had among the Montreal fan base. After the season, Guerrero was lost to free agency, while the staff ace Javier Vasquez was traded to the Yankees. The final season of the Montreal Expos came in 2004 and was again split between Montreal and San Juan. The team never recovered from an April win-loss record of 5-19 and finished the season 67-95. On September 29, 2004, Major League Baseball announced that the franchise would relocate to Washington for the 2005 season. That same night, the team played its final game in Montreal, a 9-1 loss before 31,395 fans. The team then played its final games at the Expos on the road, ending on October 3rd against the New York Mets, the team they had faced in the franchise's inaugural game in 1969. In the Expos' last ever game, the New York Mets defeated Montreal 8-1 at Shea Stadium. Jamie Carroll scored the last Expos run, and Andy Chavez became the final Expos batter in history when he grounded out in the top of the ninth to end the game. The team ended their 36-year run with an all-time record of 2,753 wins, 2,943 losses, and 4 ties. The last active former Montreal Expos player in the major leagues was Bartolo Colon, who played what is likely his last game with the Texas Rangers in 2018. Colon played half a season with the Expos in 2002. The Washington Nationals occasionally wear Expos throwback uniforms. The Nationals won the 2019 World Series, the franchise's first title in 51 seasons, under manager Dave Martinez, who had played with the Expos from 1988 to 1991. Opa G Canadian. I went to an Expo game once. That is cool. Mountain time. Alright, let me just scroll through the chat here real quick. I want to make sure, see if I'm missing anything here. I do have 2 more sections to go through here real quick. So the team identity. All right. The Expos logo consists of the stylized letters EB, which stands for Expos Baseball. When taken as a whole, the logo forms a large M representing Montreal. Okay, so now that you've heard that, you can see where they incorporated Expos baseball into the Montreal Expos. That's how they did an all-encompassing M for their logo. It also has the EB for the Expos baseballs. That's why it's the red E, and with the white upper, and then the blue B. But when you put it all encompassing, red, white, and blue, if Kevin's, yes, looks like Kevin's still here. So that's why it kind of does look like it might be a J and a B, but it's not a J and a B. It's an E and a B, all encompassing, made into a B. The Expos logo consists of the stylized letters EB, which stands for Expos Baseball. When taken as a whole, the logo forms a large M representing Montreal. In 1972, the Telemedia Radio Network bought the Jacques Duchette and Claude Raymond to serve as the Expos French language broadcast team. They were asked by Carling O'Keefe Brewery, the title sponsor for the French language broadcast, to create a French language glossary of baseball terminology. Previously particular in Montreal Royals days, French broadcasters would use English for baseball concepts that didn't have a French equivalent. Their efforts, a French language baseball lexicon was created. Words like home run became coup de circuit, and hit became coup sûr. A knuckleball became balai papillon, and literally butterfly ball. So Yoop. All right. The Expos introduced their first mascot during the 1978 season, called Soki. The mascot resembled Mr. Met with a futuristic look uniform, but was met with such a negative reaction that the team immediately retired it after 1 season. Suki was once attacked by a father of children frightened by it. Seeking a replacement, the Expos found a design for a mascot similar to the Phillies Fanatic. In the inventory of an American mascot company that had gone bankrupt, the mascot was designed by Bernie Erickson, who created the Fanatic, as well as several Muppets characters, including Miss Piggy. The team named the new mascot Youpi, which is French for Yippee, unlike Suki. Youpi was immediately popular with fans upon its introduction in 1979, particularly children, and the mascot became a fixture at children's hospitals during the 25 years as the Expos mascot. Youpi made history in 1989 when he became the first mascot in Major League history to be ejected from a ball game. The incident occurred in the 11th inning of a game against the Los Angeles against Los Angeles when Yuppie was dancing and parading on top of the Dodgers' dugout. LA's manager Tommy Lasorda complained to the umpires who ordered the mascot out of the game. Yuppie was eventually allowed to return on the provision he remained away from the Dodgers dugout. The game, coincidentally, was the longest in Expos history, as Los Angeles won 1-0 in 22 innings. The relocation of the Expos to Washington, D.C. left Yuppie in limbo. Several organizations expressed interest in taking over the character, including other Montreal sports teams. After a year in storage, the mascot was sold to the National Hockey League's Montreal Canadiens. The Canadiens' Yuppie is the first mascot in professional sports to change leagues. He made his re-debut with the Canadiens on October 18th, 2005. And then one last section I'll cover real quick here is the relationship with the Toronto Blue Jays. So the Toronto Blue Jays joined the American League as an expansion franchise in 1977, and 1 year later the Expos, for the first time in an exhibition contest, the first of an annual series that became known as the Pearson Cup. The Expos won that first game 5-4 in front of 2,221 fans on June 29th. 8 annual exhibitions, except for 1981 due to the strike, were played between 1978 and 1986. Each team won 3 games to the contests ending as ties. The teams did not meet again until 1997, with the advent of interleague play, the first regular season meetings between the two. The games boosted attendance in both Montreal and Toronto, but the two teams failed to develop a serious rivalry. John McHale, then president of the Expos, was a strong component of adding a second major league team in Toronto. The Expos remained Canadians' most popular team until their mid-1980s. Downtown coincided with the Blue Jays' rise, culminating in the Jays' first American League pennant in 1985. At the same time, the Blue Jays grew perturbed that the Expos were able to air their games in several markets in southern Ontario, such as Windsor, Belleville, and Toronto itself. The Jays lobbied MLB to designate southern Ontario as their exclusive home television territory. Bronfman opposed the request as he feared that shutting the Expos out of Canada's largest, most lucrative television market would limit the team's fan base. As part of the territorial change, the MLB allowed the Expos to air 15 games in the Jays market for free and purchase the rights to the additional times for the remainder of their existence. The Expos only had full broadcast rights in Quebec and Atlantic Canada. The loss of the viewership in southern Ontario diminished and the Expos' ability to attract sponsors and corporate partners. Indeed, Carey later wrote that the Expos miscalculated when they considered the Blue Jays as an ally rather than a potential threat, and missed a chance to cement their right to their games across Canada. Carey added that the loss of this venue stream, along with many other poor business decisions over the year, made it difficult for the Expos to be viable in Montreal. Longtime Expos play-by-play broadcaster Dave Van Horn later argued that the loss of badly needed corporate support really started a long downward spiral for the team. Regardless of their disagreements over television rights, when the Blue Jays reached the 1992 World Series, the team honored Bronfman's contributions in bringing Major League Baseball to the country by having him throw the ceremonial first pitch at the World Series game played in Canada. However, while the Blue Jays president Paul Godfrey again acknowledged the Expos' role in his own team's existence, Godfrey nonetheless voted with other teams to support contracting the Expos in 2001 and relocating them in 2004. I know it wasn't for the success of the Expos in those early years, there would not be Major League Baseball in Toronto. It wasn't an emotional or a baseball vote. It was a business decision. The Blue Jays failed to stand with their fellow Canadian team offended many Expos fans. 10 years after the Expos relocated to Washington, a two-game exhibition series between the Toronto Blue Jays and the New York Mets was held at the Olympic Stadium to conclude the spring training schedule prior to 2014 season. For the Blue Jays, the series was intended, in part, to increase the team's following in Quebec. For others, the goal was to demonstrate that Montreal had an interest in returning to Major League Baseball. Former Expo players Warren Camarty, who leads the Montreal-based project, was among the organizers. The series was a success. 96,350 fans frequently chanting "Let's go Expos" and "We want baseball" attended the two games. The Blue Jays returned for a two-game series in 2015 against the Cincinnati Reds, which was attended by 95,545 fans. The success of the series bolstered the Montreal Baseball Project's efforts. Retiring Commissioner Bud Selig was impressed by the fans in 2014 and said the city would be an excellent candidate for a new team. His replacement, Bob Manfred, echoed those comments in 2015. Olympic Stadium again hosted two spring training games prior to the beginning of the 2016 season between the Toronto Blue Jays and the Boston Red Sox, with a combined attendance of over 106,000 fans. Since 2014, the Blue Jays have made it an annual tradition to host two spring training games in Montreal before the start of each season. In 2018, Vladimir Guerrero Jr. of the Blue Jays hit a game-winning home run against the St. Louis Cardinals in an exhibition game to the delight of the Montreal crowd. So, of course, they do have 5 retired numbers from the Montreal Expos, and that would be Gary Carter. And they are the retired numbers for the Montreal Expos. Gary Carter, number 8, played from 74 to 84 in 1992. Andre Dawson, right field, center field, 1976 through 1986. Rusty Staub, right fielder, 1969 to 1971. And then Tim Raines, left field, 1979 to 1990 and 2001. And of course, like everybody and every team has Jackie Robinson, number 42, second base, retired in 1997. And as far as National Baseball Hall of Fame players that did at one time in their careers play for the Montreal Expos is Gary Carter, Andre Dawson, Tim Raines, Dick Williams as a manager, Tony Perez, Vladimir Guerrero, Randy Johnson, Pedro Martinez, Frank Robinson as a manager, Lee Smith, and Larry Walker. So there we have it. The Montreal Expos team series. All right. So hopefully you guys enjoyed that today. I will turn the camera around so you know I am really here. It is me. Hold on, let me get this turned around right here. Let me get a sip of water here. Get ready to take off here. Me and my wife wants me to take her out for lunch today, and she wants to do some shopping. So we get to go to a mall, but that's okay. Then I think she's going to a baby shower tonight or something. But other than that, all right, Paul's saying we got 11 likes, 12 likes. All right, I see that. Appreciate any of the moderators out there that have been keeping an eye on the chat for me. I have to run as well. I hate when work interferes with my fun. Take care, everyone. See you around the channels. Oh, no problem there, Kevin. You're probably already gone. I missed that. But thank you, Paul, for keeping an eye on the chat. Opachi, all right. I like that. I went to an Expo game once. Liked. All right. 9 here, awesome. Yeah, we're down to 4, and that's okay. I know a lot of people had to take off. They might have been on their lunch break when they stopped by. But I'm going to go ahead and get ready to wrap things up here. Tomorrow, we will be back with another fun-filled episode of Topps Baseball Cards. Topps Baseball Cards. We'll do the next series in this book, which we will be going over the 1975 Topps card set. The 1975 Topps card set is what we will be doing tomorrow. So hopefully you guys enjoy that and look forward to that as we do that tomorrow. Okay. So yes, tomorrow we will do the 1975 Topps set. Getting closer. We'll be into the season, start of the season, by the time we do finish up the Topps baseball card series. All right. So yes, baseball card history video series, the 1975 Topps, will be tomorrow. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and get ready to wrap things up, unless anybody out there might have a question or something. I can wait. I can go for probably a couple more minutes. I'll stop at about 1 hour and 40 minutes for this stream. But in case anybody might have any questions, feel free to throw a question out there if you do have one. All right. I can't think of anything else right off the top of my head to talk about right now. So I do appreciate everybody that joined me this morning. Sometimes you can never tell with the history, but again, for those that do want a heads up, next week we will kind of continue where the Montreal Expos ended. The Washington Nationals took over, so next Monday we will do the Washington Nationals. All right, we'll do their team history. Okay, so other than that, I did see that Kevin had to take off, and I can't really think of anything else. Is 4-leaf cards still around? They might have taken off. I will get around to your channel there, 4-leaf cards, and check you out. Paul Deitch. Paul Deitch, appreciate you being here and help me out. Keeping track. It looks like, oh, we're up to 13 thumbs up. 13 thumbs up. And I know we were probably up to double digits for a little while there in the stream. I do appreciate those that did stop by today. I know, I believe somebody had made a comment that it sounds like I'm like an audio book or something. But it does give you, at least when I do get these things together, I probably get them listed as teams in a team playlist, and I'll probably have them in alphabetical order, so it's easier to find a team if you want to review the team history again, or just go through a playlist and listen to it. So other than that, I can't really think of anything else to talk about. I got about 1 minute left to go here. I will kind of, here, I'll show you my camera. This is when I do and when I can. I work on sorting projects here. I got this one ready to go into the final stage. I got those cards to sort, those 2 boxes to sort. And I'm always coming up with something and something new to work on sorting. I've got, I haven't even finished sorting through my whole collection yet. I've got a stack over here off to the right that still have to be sorted to pull out Hall of Fame cards, things of that nature, as we do go by. But yeah, so other than that, I'm going to get ready to sign off for today, guys. You guys have a great and wonderful day. We'll see you around the channels. Probably later today I'll be poking in and out of different channels as the day progresses. And we will see you guys tomorrow. Okay? Bye now. Take care. Have a wonderful day.